Okay, so another interruption. This is either going to be another little addendum that you're going to have to go clickety clickety click, or I am going to get my head out of my butt, figure out how to do editing, and then maybe I can edit this all together seamlessly and get rid of all this drivel. But that aside, where we were was I was just getting ready to show you a picture of what I intend to do with the cutter that I'm going to make for trimming these cases down. Now, I first did this with a Time Precision neck turner. I don't know how old this guy is, but it's from back in the 80s. I had a cutter get dull. I probably did something stupid, tried to turn some steel case amors, and no, I don't know what happened. Anyway, I ordered some extra cutters, and this is set up so that on the mandrel there's a stop here, and you're supposed to run the case on until it hits the stop. Which means that you kind of have to trim them to length before, and what I'm saying is, in my world, brass cases, until they've been hammered into submission, are simply gobs of modeling clay. There's not a dimension on this case that is the same from case to case. They're neither parallel nor square, nor is the head at 90 degrees to the center line of the case, nor is the length the same, nor is the shoulder. The only thing that's on here right now is that I have forced a setting into the shoulder. I have forced this to where it, what I call, heels closed. So that's a forced setting. That's the first adjustment to this case, is necking it down and sitting that shoulder. But the rest of the case is just copy. It's just out there till it's been fired a few times. So I could take this right now, because I'm going to be turning it now, which again is not normal for me. Most of the time I go blow these out. But I don't have a Fireform barrel. This is just for this particular. I could do it in another one and it would work. But I decided, you know what, I'm going to try Jackie's method in the raw, in the buff, straight up, neck these things down, put them on the mandrel. I love the way the guy thinks. I love what he did with this. I think it's going to work. And the other interesting thing is, when I necked these two cases down in a prior video, I did them in one run by just slamming them into a, from 6.5, I ran them into a 6x47 die all the way. No step, no support, no anything. And they came out pretty stinking straight. Straighter than I expected them. Straight enough that I don't think we can see any run out in them. Now, the method that we're going to turn these with means that I take a driver, basically a shell holder, and I run these onto a finely turned mandrel, and they press fit on that mandrel, and then I go turn the neck. Now this presents a few problems that I haven't dealt with, a few things. I've been feeling as I'm talking here to see how this corner looks. I'm going to have to blow it up and take a good look at it, because where I was going with this Time Precision thing is, it indexes right here, which means that somehow you have to establish a length. I didn't like that. This length is just still floating out there in space somewhere. So instead I bought some replacement cutters, and I ground the cutter to match the shoulder angle, kinda. Let me show you. Jacking around, I lost my pen. Who knows what happened? Probably right here in the camera somewhere. So, case neck, shoulder. What we're doing is taking this case neck here and turning it down to a smaller size. And yet still, we don't want to cut deeply into this and notch that shoulder, which commonly happens, and then you get something called a neck separation after a few firings. Because you've cut into the shoulder and left a little nugget, a little notch there. This of course blows out when you fire it, but now you've got a weak spot, a thin spot, a wear spot there. So instead, what I did, I didn't like indexing on the case mouth because I didn't feel that that was consistent. So I eyeballed this really close, and I ground myself a cutter that closely approximated the angle, and then went dead. So now I can take this, power the case up, run the cutter on until it stops cutting. it hits right here and it just stops because it cuts in. It shaves, shave, 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 and then just trails out, just feathers out, no thin spots. I haven't separated a neck in 25 years. I did. I actually had one pop off here a couple of weeks ago and I had no idea why. I just was out shooting and a neck popped off and I set it aside. Hey, one of these days I'm going to throw it up under the scope, take a look at it. Haven't. Don't. Not really a concern. So, cutter ground to the angle so that as I go in, it stops cutting. Now it's going to be a little tricky because the lathe is a mechanical thing. It's a lot harder to stop than my fingers. So maybe it'll start pushing the case off. Maybe I'll eyeball it. But in any case, I'm going to go back and feather this joint in and cut to my 2, 6. Oh, I'm screwing up. My head said 4 and my fingers started to do 4. That's the problem with, especially in videotaping or reading aloud, which is something I've done a lot in the past. You're always reading a sentence ahead so that you can get your inflections right. This videotaping is kind of the same thing. So my mouth is dragging back here, my brain's up here trying to extemporate something that's going to make sense because I don't want to edit this crap. It's easy to fix stuff if a person can edit, and that was my initial plans. I thought, well, I'll go in there, I'll just slobber stuff down on film, and then I'll go back and edit it and cut it all together. Well, it turns out that's just a complete pain in my hiney. So I'm not going to do that. So I have to self-edit. I have to vomit this stuff out clean the first time, and I make a lot of mistakes. The mistakes don't bother me, but the inclarity just does not work very well for me. I like to be clear in that which I'm presenting. So if there's inclarities, of course, there are venues. You can comment on the video, or you can go on the internet and find me, or you can call me at my house and read me out. All things that have happened many times in the past. In the meantime, I'm just trying to show you where I'm going with this. And the interesting thing is, best laid plans, it's going to be fun for me, and maybe for the viewer, for me to lay these plans and go see if they work. Many times my plans fall flat on their face, and that's good. You learn from everything. There's an expression in an obscure segment of the shooting community where people say, every shot makes someone happy. Some of you might be aware of that sentiment and where it originates. So, that's very true. If nothing else, you can laugh at another man's misfortune. But I'm going to go ahead and try. And while I'm sitting here, I noticed, some of you may have wondered, what is this thing sitting here off to the side? That's an interesting thing. I was going to do an epoxy making tutorial. I haven't got there yet, so I'll still try to do it. My bedding procedure is different than everyone else on the planet. I've tried all these different Bisonites and Devcons and aerogels and Swiss and Australian and American of all sorts. I don't want to start throwing names down because it looks like I'm dissing on them. I'm not. They all work for the most part. But I use something else entirely, and I use a liquid epoxy, and then I add to it a variety of things to get the thixotropicity and or viscosity and or flowability that I want. That is a real term, and it is really, one is accomplished with Cabosil or Aerosil, which is fumed silica, and that is the thing that affects the thixotropic properties. And the other is done with microspheres, which is bulks things up. But anyway, my epoxy was crystallizing, so I put this 200 watt light bulb in this fixture right here, and stuck it over the big old jar of epoxy. This all happened during filming procedures, of course, because at the end of the day I'm like, well, I got this coming up, I better melt that epoxy. So I shuggied this thing up in there and went in and went to sleep. I came out in the morning to start a video, and of course this the heat, this is a 200 watt bulb, the heat had no doubt changed the fits up above it, and it went ooh, and ended up right on my epoxy jug. So I got here to find epoxy dripping off the corners of this bench. In earlier videos, this bench wasn't as uniformly colored, but I've scrubbed that epoxy juice all around and then hit it up with vinegar and then hit it up with acetone and then hit it up with, no, I didn't use acetone, I used isopropyl alcohol, one of my favoriteest of all things in the world. So vinegar and isopropyl, and I cleaned it all off, and now I just fired this thing back up while I go start resetting for my video. I'm going to keep an eye on it and come back and wipe all the crap off of it. So what that's on there is melted plastic and epoxy of a secret type that I'm not going to tell you, except that it's commissioned by Brownells, which Brownells does still have a place in the world, and I do even in the high-end accuracy department, and I support them and what they've done for the shooting industry anytime that I can, because they have done great things in the gunsmithing and custom gun building community. Even though the way I build things is not the Brownells method, doesn't matter. You know, the basics, the roots are still there, and unfortunately to all of you that are looking for the latest magical formula, Acraglass and Acraglass gel. Now I can't comment on the new one that comes in the little squeezy mix type tube because I haven't used that. And I don't use gel very much because the gel has some characteristics I don't like. So instead I use the original formula Acraglass, and then I mix it to the consistency that I want. So there, that secret's out. But that's what's stuck all over the top of this lamp right now. So I'm going to let it melt and mung up here while I start moving things around. Shut this camera off, and the next time we approach this, it's snowing outside. So this is Washington State. It's not supposed to. But it's been miserable. In fact, we've been watching a show called Alone with my 11-year-old son. They drop some guys off on Vancouver Island, and they live there until they have to hit the tap out button and go home because they're not going to live there anymore. And it's the only survival show on the internet, only survival show in the public consciousness, the only survival show that's ever been made that is real. And I'm a survival show guy. So this is the real deal, and all I can think of as we're sitting there watching it is, oh man, that looks just like outside. I could grab my camera, because I'm in filming mode. I could walk out on my back 40, and I could wander around, and I could film a situation that is indistinguishable from this particular piece of footage, because Vancouver Island is right up the road from me. And it basically looks like my backyard. And my backyard right now, if you ever get a chance to watch Alone, watch it and you'll be thankful for your nice warm bed. And to do this, I've got to go back out into my shop, which is only one door away from that outside. And it's cold out there right now. But I'll go hit the heaters, and hopefully we'll see you out there in a little while. We'll turn some cases and see if we can make something useful out of this. I was really impressed with what I saw Jackie do and how he did it once I figured out what he was doing. Which, here's the funny thing. Communication is hard. Jackie's really good at it, alright? Jackie filmed it. He was very clear. Everything about it was crystal clear. Boy, that light is, whew, that's brutal. Yet, I didn't get it. I looked at it and I thought, there's some things about it. I just missed one of the key things he was doing, so now I'm going to go try it. Which brings us all, I told you all that so I can tell you this. Maybe at that point, when we slide this thing up onto the mandrel, we're going to be able to see that those two cases should exhibit a little bit more wobble than these ones. Now, if I'm wrong on that, you can all pick on me on the inner tube and say, yep, Ellen, well, I don't know what he's talking about. We'll see.